Labdien, godātie studenti! Man ir prieks redzēt jūs tik kuplā skaitā trešajā no ārvalstu vēstnieku lekciju cikliem šajā universitātē. Man liels prieks, ka šodien ir piekritusi sniegt vieslekciju Izraēlas vēstniece Latvijā Hagitas Ben Jakovas kundze. Bet sākumā es došu vārdu ievadvārdu pateikšanai par šo ciklu mūsu akadēmisko un starptautisko sakaru departamentai profesorai Jutai Kroičai.
Your Excellency, Hagitas Ben Jakovas, the Ambassador of Israel, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to greet you on this important visit to Rīgas Stradiņa University. This lecture is a part of a much bigger lecture cycle this academic year given by ambassadors residing in the Republic of Latvia. Today we will have a pleasure of Her Excellency Hagitas Ben Jakovas, the Ambassador of Israel, giving a lecture on the topic of challenges for the Israeli diplomacy in view of the recent developments in the Middle East. Diplomacy has always been one of the most important aspects of politics. In most cases in history, it has allowed different countries, cultures and religions to find solutions to even the most complicated issues and problems. Thus, diplomacy continues to be a very difficult and challenging, but necessary art for communication, cooperation and peacemaking between people all around the world. Therefore, it's my pleasure and honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Hagitas Ben Jakovas to present her topic on the challenges of diplomacy.
Anyway, my name is Hagitas Ben Jakovas, and I'm the new ambassador of Israel to Latvia. And I'm very happy for the opportunity to be here with you today and to give you maybe another aspect of our policy in the region or our narrative, if I may. And I would like to thank also, of course, the rector of the university and the vice rector and the professor for this opportunity. Just let me begin with only one slide to give just a perspective of what Israel is facing these days at the United Nations, because I think in a way the United Nations reflects the situation of Israel in the world today, and I think it will give you an idea of the challenge that we are facing in one slide. So what you see here, well, no, I'm not changing anything. But you can see, well, it says 192, it's already 193, because South Sudan was joining just a few months, it's 193 states. But anyway, you can see here the map of the UN. 193 states, 21 Arab, it's the League of Arab States. 56, of course, including the 21, are the members of the OIC, the Organization of the Islamic Conference, including Iran, of course, inside. And then you have here 117 up to 132, the non-alliance movement, plus China. All of these voices votes against Israel in like 99% of resolutions in the United Nations. Okay? Thank you. And then we have 27 members of the EU, 3 Canada, Australia, New Zealand, US, and Israel. So I think without giving you a map of the world, but giving you one slide here. So this is Israel. Well, it's the same size of the United States with one vote in the UN, but I think you can get an idea of what do we face in the United Nations. We don't have any chance to pass any resolution because the majority of the votes, I mean, just to count, the states, are automatically against us. So, again, one slide to show where Israel vis-a-vis the world and how it is reflected today in the United Nations. But you can close. But I don't want, this is today. I want to go back to 1947 with your permission. Israel will mark the anniversary of the UN partition plan of 1947. This plan meant partition of Israel into Arab and Jewish states and the internationalization of Jerusalem. The purpose of this plan was to find a political settlement that will enable the Jewish population, the population that lived for thousands of years in Israel, and the population who survived after the Holocaust and immigrate to Israel, as well as the Arab population, will enable them to live in respect and welfare in the region. This plan was supposed to end the British mandate of Israel, the end of the colonialism era in our region, and the decision by the Zionist leadership to support this plan, to give up some territories. It's not just territories, by the way. We are talking about some historic heritage, of course. This decision by the Zionist leadership was a very courageous decision by that time, and they approved it, of course. Unfortunately, there was a rejection by the Arab states. The rejection was not just as vote in the United Nations, but they started a war with Israel. Eventually, it became our independent war. But it's important to understand, I think, just how everything more or less started in 1947. And the reason why I'm giving the time to explain that is because this story is being ignored by the Palestinian narrative today. No one remembers what happened in 1947. Israel approved the partition plan, and it was rejected by the Arab states, and they started a war. So this is one thing that we need to face, of course, when we talk about challenges of diplomacy. A narrative that is, in many ways, one-sided. I think it's important. The reason why I also thought it's very important to bring this story again and to raise it with you is because the situation that we are facing today, in many ways, is the outcome or the consequences of that rejection. But not everything is so pessimistic. We had some turning points in the history of the conflict. And I must mention here, of course, the Camp David Agreement of 1978, 1979. We signed an agreement with Egypt, which was an historic agreement for us and for the region. And of course, it needed very courageous leadership of Anwar Sadat at the time. And we signed an agreement with Jordan in 1994, which was a very important one. We did have very good relations with Jordan, mainly military relations then, but when we signed the agreement, it became public. In between, it was September 93, and afterwards in 95, we signed the Oslo Accords with the PLO. And we started with a declaration of principles, which was very important. I think today everyone are talking about the Palestinian Authority, which is very, in Israel, I think the young generation don't even remember what was before the Palestinian Authority. It's something that people, the young generation were born to this reality. But before 93, there was no such a thing. There was the organization, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. In 93, the Declaration of Principle enable it to become a Palestinian authority. And it was not only about security regulations between us and the Palestinians. It consists of a large scale of aspects, and important to mention the economic ties. Because since then, until now, until today, by the way, we do have some economic regulations, tax regime, etc. And this enables us to have some kind of relationship with our Palestinian neighbors. I don't know how many of you know, we do have export from Gaza to Europe, by the way. Strawberries, flowers, once a year are going out from Gaza to European states, and it's it's a result of cooperation between the Gaza agricultural business people and the Israeli authorities that enable it to use the markets and go to the European markets. But let me go back. This is, of course, the positive aspect of the Oslo Accords, the economic cooperation. But this is only one very small, unfortunately, aspect of the relations. Because although we signed this accord with the representatives of the PLO, which became later on the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, then a very small organization with some other Palestinian sectors, rejected the Palestinian and the Israeli joint declaration. It's not just, again, when I'm saying reject, it's not just that they will vote against and that's it, and they respect the majority vote. Since that rejection of Hamas, Israel suffered from many suicide attacks and suicide bombers. And I don't know how many of you heard about that, but hundreds, thousands of Israeli civilians were killed in that suicide attacks. And it made it very difficult for the governments of Israel to implement or to come to a negotiation table with a partner that do not really do anything in order to fight this kind of suicide attacks or to fight this terrorism. I mentioned Hamas because today Hamas is a major partner of the Palestinian Authority. And if we talk about the Palestinian side, the partners with whom we should or need to negotiate with for peace, this is something that we should bear in mind. Hamas is, organization, ideology, believes in the Islam. It's not just a secular organization, it's a religious organization. Why do I mention that? Because it's very hard for a religious organization to come and to change the ideology. It's not like a secular movement that has some development during the years. And religious ideological movement cannot just one morning decide that, until now God gave us the right to fight against Israel. The next morning, God disappeared. It's not like that. It's something that they are being, sent by God to do. So it makes it much more difficult for us to fight this kind of organization or to change the ideology or to change a lot of things. So the government of Israel tried during the years with the Palestinian partners to come to the negotiation table. And we did have some roundtables of negotiations. And in 2005, we had another turning point. Israel evacuated Gaza Strip, which was the first time, it wasn't the first time. The first one, we evacuated Sinai with an agreement with Egypt. But in 2005, it was a very important step. Israel evacuated thousands of citizens from a territory. I think it means that if we will need to do it again in the future for a real peace, for a real chance to live in secure state, we will do it again. But the fact is that since we left Gaza, the situation got worse, unfortunately. Hamas changed its shape, and there was someone to help him in changing its shape. I'm talking about Iran. And I think it's very important to explain that if in the first years of the 90s, we were talking about Hamas as another sector, Palestinian sector, who fought against Israel, and we used to think about it as a guerrilla forces. Today we're talking about still an organization, but that is well trained by Iran. We'll talk immediately about Iran. It's a different story in our changing world, but I'm talking about an organization that is trained by Iran, immune by Iran, and it's very similar of what's going on with Hezbollah in the north border of Israel. So we have this entity, Hamas, that is, ideologically against Israel, religion, from the religious aspect, of course, I'm talking about, getting trained by Iran, getting missiles with wider range to threat Israel, and doing nothing in order to come to some peace agreements with our side. And everyone expects that we will just come and negotiate with the Palestinians. So one question is that we should ask ourselves, who should we negotiate with? Should we negotiate with the Palestinian Authority, or should we negotiate with Hamas? Who are representing today the Palestinians? So this is a huge question that we still need to answer, and unfortunately we don't have an answer. There are some reconciliation trials between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas because they do not reconcile by themselves. And this is another story. It's nothing to do with Israel. It's just something to do with difficulties inside the Palestinians. Something to do with religion, of course, and acknowledgement of Israel as a neighbor country. But they will have to find a solution for that before they come and negotiate with Israel. And just to mention, I started with the UN and the vote against the UN. Of course, today on the agenda is the attempt of the Palestinian Authority to be recognized as a member state in the United Nations. And the question is, what kind of a member state? If they represent Hamas as well as the Palestinians, what does it mean? Hamas yesterday, one of their leaders said, we will never recognize the right of Israel to exist. Still today. So, Israel still needs to face some issues of existence, some questioning from neighboring entities about the right of existence. And this is something very serious. I don't want to take you to the history of this region, but we still need to face it seems that we need to prove to the world that we have the right to exist. I mentioned Hamas and I mentioned Hezbollah in the north just to show that Israel is not just facing one kind of an enemy, but we have Hamas in the south and we have Hezbollah in the north, and Israel is very small, very small. So we don't have much to maneuver there with our enemies. Today, definitely the situation, as I mentioned, is different from what we were 10 years ago, definitely since 1947. I mentioned the different shape of Hamas, but it's not only Hamas. When we look today at the Arab world, our region, Israel, is situated in this region. I mentioned one democracy vis-a-vis the Arab League, the OIC, the Muslim states. So we see today a different world. We see today the rise of the Arab street, revolutions among some other Arab states. What does it mean? Does it mean a change of regime? Does it mean a change of thoughts, a change of ideology? Unfortunately, not necessarily, because although we had an agreement with Egypt in 1978, maybe I will ask you, how many tourists do you think came to Israel since then from Egypt? Do you know? How many tourists, Egyptian tourists? Let's say you have an agreement with, I don't know, some European states. How many tourists from Egypt, you think, came to Israel since 1978, since the signing of peace agreement? Well, it's, you can try and guess how many. Just, throw numbers.
2,000.
How many?
2,000.
2,000. Wow, you're very large in giving us the 2,000. No, not even 100. Very few. 5. Maybe 5. Maybe. It's very sad. It's very sad. But the truth is that it's not about that people didn't want to go to Israel. It was something that was conducted by the regime. It was very hard for tourists from Egypt in the first years to come to Israel. They were interrogated so much that they didn't want to bother to come to Israel. Eventually, we are standing on zero tourists from Egypt to Israel. Now, it's very hard to emphasize this. What does it mean? I'm talking about driving. It takes few hours to drive from Egypt to Israel, to the center of Israel, to the south of Israel. It's just, from Sinai, it's just, half an hour, less than half an hour. It's just 0 tourists from Egypt to Israel. Many tourists from Israel to Egypt, okay? So I think it's just a small example. What does it mean, peace? I'm talking about peace agreement with Egypt, peace agreement with Jordan. We do have more tourists from Jordan, but it's basically more business people that comes to Israel. But this is very, I don't know if you understand the situation that Israel is facing, but I think this is just an example to show what is the situation. And after so many years of Arab Street, let's take the example of Egypt today. Arab Street or Egyptian that are channeled to think in one way. That it's okay that we do have a peace agreement with Israel, but it's not okay to visit Israel. Every day, anti-Semite articles. Every day, articles against Israel and the people of Israel. Eventually, people who read the newspaper grew up to believe that Israel is very bad. That peace agreement with Israel is not so good. Maybe it's not so good. So after there is a revolution and the street is rising up against the regime, the next step is burning the flag of Israel. Now, why should someone in Egypt would like to burn a flag of Israel? What do they have to lose in good relations with Israel? They can gain economically, security-wise, cultural-wise, scientific relations. We can do so many things with Egypt. Why should someone want to burn a flag of Israel in Egypt? I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer. But this is something that we had to face just a few months ago. I'm not talking about 1947. I'm talking about 2011. And this is Egypt. Of course, I'm not talking about other Arab states that we do not have relations with, but we're talking about the Arab Spring. Democracy is rising again. Let's take the example of Tunisia. Tunisia was the first one, by the way, to start this whole Arab Spring and the uprising of the people. Something that came really very in the pride of the Western states, the pride of the Arab states, the uprising from the street. Today, we are facing a government, an Islamic government in Tunisia. The Islamic party gained more than 40% of the votes. What do you think was part of the declaration of the future Prime Minister of Tunisia? It was just, 13th of November. 13th of November 2011. What did he say? He said many things. But among other things, he said, from here, we will conquer Jerusalem, Tunisia. So it's very interesting why someone in Tunisia would think that this is the effort that he should put nowadays to conquer Jerusalem. Where is Israel in this picture of the Arab Spring? This is something that you will have to answer, and I will have to answer, but eventually the world will have to answer. But this is the situation we're facing today. And I mentioned already Egypt. We don't know yet what will happen with Jordan. This is the second Arab state that we do have an agreement with. But this Arab Spring, as I just emphasized to you a minute ago, put a question mark on our agreements, peace agreements with the neighbors. And with this situation, we need to come to the negotiation table with the Palestinians. It's not easy, to say the least. I think that, I will mention one more thing about the Arab Spring. I mean, it showed very clearly that the Arab states are declining. The importance of the Arab states are declining. I mean, Egypt used to be the very important Arab state in the region. Decline of its importance make it possible for non-Arab states to rise. I'm talking about Turkey, which we used to have strong and strategic relations with. Unfortunately, nowadays it's not so much. Hopefully it will get better. I believe personally that it will get better. And then we have Iran, the importance of Iran. And I think everyone that reads the headlines today reads about the report that the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Organization, published regarding the nuclear threat that Iran imposed to the world. Not only to Israel. I'm not talking about Israel now. I'm talking about the threat to the world. And I'm not talking about nuclear bomb. I'm talking about proliferation of terrorism. I was talking in the beginning. Hamas, Hezbollah. So, well, I think I described here not a very optimistic picture of the region and some of the challenges that we have to face today. But I think that the history proves that there are no fixed solutions in the Middle East. And we need a lot of patience in this region. And it will take time until we reach any agreement. And even if we reach an agreement, it will take time to really normalize relations between people to people. It's a lot to do with education. And I think this is why it's so important for me to come and to expose you to this narrative, because I really think that education is the basic of good relations between people to people. I think knowing the other, understand the other people, it's very important. And this is, I think, the message that I bring with me today to you. We really respect the rights of other nations to protest, freedom of association, freedom of speech, definitely the right to exist, and we acknowledge the right of the Palestinian for their own statehood. What we request is that others will respect our rights to exist in peace in our region as a Jewish state. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, and now it's time for questions, and please be open to discussion. Lūdzu, uzdodat jautājumus vēstniecei.
Any question, even not related to the lecture, about Israel? Yeah.
Your Excellency, I would like to use this opportunity for my own curiosity.
Yeah.
I would like to ask how it is for you as a woman to be a representative of this of Israel, of a country that is actually in this kind of a situation, and coming to the university with the really big security demands. We really understand that, but that's just a curiosity how it is for you, like as a woman, to in this kind of situation. Is this what you were going for when you were thinking that you would like to become an ambassador, when you became an ambassador?
This is very nice question. Thank you for the question. I must say I didn't even pay attention to the fact that I'm a woman ambassador when I came here to the university. I think the first time I paid attention to the fact that I'm doing something that is unique was during my military service. It was long ago. It was more than 20 years ago. Then I was very unique. I was one woman soldier among 20 or more men. Then it was unique. Today in Israel, it's not unique anymore. Today in Israel, you have women pilots in the fighting combat unit. So it's not unique anymore. And in a way, the military service of Israel reflecting the society and reflecting the general attitude of society towards these gender issues. When I joined the foreign ministry, in my course, it was also like almost 20 years ago. In my cadet course, we were almost 50% women. So it's just natural that eventually I'll become an ambassador. I have many colleagues, women colleagues who are, not many, I'm not saying that it's the perfect situation in Israel where we have 100% equal between the genders. But definitely today in Israel it's not that issue as it used to be. So for me, of course, it's very important to come here to represent my state in this university. Just nice to be also a woman.
I'll ask you a question about next year in the United States is the election year. And one of the Republican candidates, Ron Paul, has stated that in order to fulfill his goals to start democracy within the Middle Eastern countries like Syria or Iran, he would cut foreign aid to Israel. I would like to ask you, are you concerned about that in case he wins the election, or are you confident enough that the Israeli lobby in Washington would take care of that even if he won, and would that still be like it has been for the past years?
I wish it was so easy, just to let one lobby to fix everything for us. Unfortunately, I'm sure you know it's not that easy. In order to keep interest of a state, they are working very hard in order to make sure that the interest will be well known to everyone, not just one lobby. It's very easy, to mention one lobby. I hope that Israel is not counting on that lobby, the Jewish lobby only. Our policy definitely not counting only on that lobby. I don't think that, well, I think that what is worrying is not about cutting the foreign aid to Israel. I think what is worrying is the attitude towards Israel. I mean, praising Syria and Iran is worrying me. Definitely, I mean, supporting Iran is worrying me. And I think that we should, I mean, we should put the emphasis on fighting those attitudes and putting efforts internationally against Iran and Syria and all kinds of terrorist organizations. I think Al-Qaeda, by the way, is a huge threat to the world as well. Something new that needs to pay attention to that as well. But again, I mean, one should think how many efforts it should put against the Iranian and Syria regime, and not how to cut all kind of you know, foreign aid. This is too simple, I think.
First of all, I would like to thank you for this interesting lecture. I think it gave us a quite good impression of the Israeli view on the situation in this region. And I would like to congratulate Israel for the big economic growth they had in recent years, especially in sustainable branches like the technology. And I would like to focus my question on the one part of this technology branch which touches the Homeland Security branch, which is at the total worth about $3 billion just for civilian use. So in the entity of Israel. And this Homeland Security branch based mostly on, well, as it says, on security matters. So as you pointed out, Israel is very threatened by terroristic attacks and the unstable situation of the region. And $3 billion is not quite a low amount of money. And I would like to ask you how these economic branches will develop when Israel and the region came to somehow stability. So will Israel have to restructure the economic branch, or how do you see it?
So first of all, I think that the dream of every Israeli, I think also our politicians, is that we will be able to allocate 90% of our budget to education and not to Homeland Security. I think this is the dream of all of us. I think it's very important. We still have discussions, very strong discussion, debate in Israel, how much to allocate for security and how much to allocate for education. I think it's the same here, if I'm not mistaken. When it will happen, I don't know. It's a question. When can we allocate more for education? But right now, I was talking about changes in the region. There is also a change in the shape of the wars. Today, well, we used to have wars against. I didn't get into it. We had so many wars. But we used to fight, not inside Israel. We used to fight in different territories outside Israel. And nowadays, the war just gets closer and in fact threatening our civilians. Meaning that Hamas today can fire a missile, which they do, by the way. 2 weeks ago, I just mentioned it to your rector. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 40 missiles were fired into the south of Israel. I don't know if you can imagine a situation where you at home with your small brother, maybe 2 years old, 3 years old, 40 missiles, and you hear every falling of this missile you hear, and you need to run to a secure room. I don't think you can even imagine that situation. Hopefully, you won't need to be in this situation. But But anyway, what I wanted to say is that it's not anymore, something to do with military expenses, something to do with protecting the civilians in Israel today. So when you say homeland security, it's really to secure the civilians today. So unfortunately, the budget will have still be billions of dollars. Thanks to the development of the ICT and this technology that you mentioned in Israel, we managed to have a very unique and modernized systems in less money, so it helps. But it's true that it's one of the challenges, how to face this, economic crisis with the threat that is growing and the need for more education. It's a challenge. I hope this is what you meant in your question. Okay. Yeah.
It's nice to have you here. I have a simple question. Are there any treaties or accords signed between Latvia and Israel?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for that question. Thank you so much for that question. I was talking about the Arab world and the challenges of diplomacy. Next year, we're going to celebrate 20 years of bilateral relations between Israel and Latvia. 20 years, I must say that we have very good relations with Israel and Latvia. We signed many agreements. We have I mentioned the education. We just discussed the students' exchange. I think all these kind of bilateral relations and exchange can be possible with the help of all kind of agreements that we have. And we do have cultural science and the education agreement that enable this exchange of students, for instance, in between the states. So it's the framework that enable the universities, like this university, to have all kind of programs, exchange programs, and it does exist. So we have economic agreements, and we have political agreements that enable us to have political dialogues between the states. And we have high-level visits between Latvia and Israel. We have very good bilateral relations, and I'm very happy to say that, and I'm very proud of that.
So the last question.
Okay.
Hello, and I also thank you for this interesting lecture. I wanted to ask about the Hezbollah and what was the
Hamas?
Hamas. I find it kind of interesting that those groups of military groups being Sunni Muslims, Sunni Muslims. I don't know how to spell it right, but Iran basically is a different religion of Muslims, and I find it interesting that even though they have those differences, how can they even work together? I kind of don't understand the logic behind their actions in this kind of situation, because I can understand that the Iran radicalizes the Hezbollah and the Hamas, but I don't understand how they can harbor so much hatred for a country. How do you see it?
Very, very interesting and important question. I didn't get into the Sunni Shia sections in Islam. I'll try to explain in a few minutes. It's very complicated. Well, everything that I just mentioned in a few words is very complicated. This is a complicated situation, but let me just refer to your question. First of all, Hezbollah is a Shia. It's not Sunni. Hamas is Sunni. It's one very interesting changes in the region. You cannot separate it anymore to Sunni and Shia. You cannot. This is why I didn't even mention it, because as you see, Iran is supporting Hamas. Now, it's not very easy. It's not very easy for Hamas to be supported by Iran, because it means they are dependent on Iran. it means that Iran is expecting them to behave in a way that it's like, Iran is using Hezbollah and Hamas like the branches. They're sending the branches in the region. It's very important for Iran to be here, very important for Iran to be in the north. So they're using it. For Hamas, it's also for Hezbollah, it's very complicated because they have different targets. Well, they want to rule here as Palestinian, entity. So it's very complicated. The relations between Iran and Hamas, it's not so simple. It's very complicated, but it's nothing to do with religion. I mean, the sections inside Islam, because they have one mutual interest, and this is to destroy Israel. For that, there is no importance if you are Shia or Sunni. It's the same target. So it's very easy to cooperate. You just give me immune, and I will fight and destroy Israel. Then you get what you want, and I get what I want. But it's very complicated inside the relation between Hamas and Iran because, there are some differences. So it's not that simple. But it's very easy to cooperate because, well, first of all, Hamas needs the training, needs the immunization, to be immune, needs all the missiles and the equipment, etc., and they get it for free from Iran. So it's a mutual interest. It's about mutual interest. It's not about, in this case, not so much about differences of religion because this is nothing to do with how Iran doesn't force them to be Shiite.
So, thank you, Your Excellency, for your time and interesting lecture. But now I'd like to invite all of you to opening of exhibition of Israel photographers in foyer of our university. Tad, cienījamie studenti, paldies, ka atnācāt lekciju, un paldies Izraēlas vēstnieces pārstāvjiem vēstniecei par lekciju. Un es ļoti ceru, ka jūs visi arī pievienosieties uz Izraēlas fotogrāfu izstādes atklāšanu tepat foyer, tūlīt par 12. Liels paldies. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.